This program today is being co-sponsored not just by the Murphy Institute, but by the Luann Doomer Center for Women in the St. Paul campus, the Pro-Life Center here at the law school, and the Lex Vitae Pro-Life Student Group. The sponsorship for which we are, co-sponsorships for which we are extremely grateful, reflect the broad nature of the discourse that we are about to hear. I'm going to turn it right over to our moderator for today, Professor Tom Berg. He's a scholar and activist here on our faculty, and he'll tell you who he is, a little bit more about that in a minute.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. In the contentious abortion debate, no strong consensus will probably ever be possible. But can we even find some common ground or a policy that takes account of some of the concerns of both sides? Our speakers today explore one possible direction for locating common ground. It's often suggested that increased social supports for women, children, and families can reduce the number of abortions and unwanted pregnancies. Western European nations provide more social supports than America does, but in several ways their laws also regulate abortion more strictly than American laws do. Is such a model a proper or feasible one for America? And thus, the question for today's debate: if the U.S. supported women, children, and families more fully as they do in Europe, should elective abortion be further restricted? We have two terrific speakers and authors here to debate that question. Arguing yes to the question is Charlie Camosy, Associate Professor of Theological and Social Ethics at Fordham University, and the author of 4 books, including Beyond the Abortion Wars, A Way Forward for a New Generation. Professor Camosy serves on the board of the Democrats for Life of America, where, full disclosure, I also serve. And he belongs to the international working group called Contending Modernities, which attempts to bring secular liberalism, Catholicism, and Islam into dialogue about bioethics. Arguing no to the question is Robin Marty, a freelance reporter, speaker, and activist, and the author of, among other things, the book called Crow After Roe, how women's health is the new separate but equal, and how to change that. Robin focuses primarily on state-based abortion access, including legislation, clinic access, and the people who provide abortion services or support those clinics, as well as the national and local movement leaders seeking to make abortion illegal. Robin has written for Rolling Stone, Ms. Magazine, and many other publications, and has done training sessions for major abortion rights organizations. So here's the format for our program. Each speaker will have 12 minutes to present. Charlie will speak first, then Robin. After that, each speaker may take up to 5 minutes to comment on each other's presentations. Either speaker can waive that and move directly into the Q&A if he or she wishes. The Q&A, in the Q&A part, the audience, you are invited to write questions on cards. Sean is holding up the blue card there that are distributed somewhere close to you. And the Murphy student scholars will be walking up and down the aisles to collect those cards after each presentation. So direct your question, if possible, to one presenter or the other. And I will read through those cards and choose from among the questions given our limited time. Each presenter will get 2 minutes to reply to a question, and then the other presenter will have an opportunity to reply as well. So be thinking of your questions and be listening to our wonderful speakers, and we'll start off with Charlie Camosy.
So thanks to St. Thomas and the organizers, particularly Sean and Lisa, for the invitation and for this putting on this exciting series. We don't need any arguments for why this kind of series is necessary in today's culture, but thanks nonetheless. I'm particularly excited to be engaging with Robin this afternoon. She's one of, in my view anyway, very few people with a public voice on these sets of issues who is, one, a very principled abortion rights activist, but two, also someone who carefully and even charitably engages with her opponents. If you haven't already done so, I really encourage you to read her contributoria article, which details her, I struggled to think about what verb to use. I came up with embedding with pro-lifers during the 2015 March for Life. It is an incredibly fair, respectful, and even informative piece. And I'd like to begin by just quoting how she ends her piece. She says, quote, "I will never ever believe that the rights of the developing life in the womb outweigh the rights of the person carrying it, or that she has an obligation once pregnant to provide society with a live, full-term infant regardless of her own emotional and medical needs. But the march has reminded me once more that those who oppose abortion have their own set of truths they believe just as much as I believe mine. If there is ever going to be a point where the two sides can work to a common end, say on supporting pregnant workers, extending maternity leave and child care subsidies, or ensuring access to quality health care, we have to be able to focus on where our interests do actually intersect. It would be a wonderful way to try to get past that barrier and have policies where we can work with abortion opponents. After all, as I learned at the march, there are truly a lot of them," end quote. I wrote a book which argued for a kind of grand bargain on abortion and social issues, which argued something similar. In something I called the Mother and Prenatal Child Protection Act, I argued for paid family leave for both parents, subsidies for child care, more legal protections for parents and especially women at work, and much, much more. But unlike Robin, I believe that prenatal children deserve more protection of the law, especially because they are voiceless, vulnerable, and for many, wildly inconvenient. This, it seems to me, is one of the main purposes of law, to protect weaker populations from the strong who find their dignity inconvenient. And if we look around and see, if we look at other countries, for instance, that have more social support for women and families, they often legally restrict abortion much more than the United States does. If you look at your handout, you'll see that some evidence of that. Belgium restricts at 12 weeks, requires that women have to be, quote, in a state of distress, and have a 6-day waiting and counseling period. You can read the others for yourselves. I will highlight a couple. Germany actually mandates that the woman be told that the child has a right to life before she can procure an abortion. Ireland, as many of you know, basically bans abortion except when the mother's life is in danger, though there is a movement afoot to try to change that. And Poland bans abortion except in cases of life, rape, and health, and they seem to be pushing in the opposite direction of Ireland, trying to restrict it even further. With the United Kingdom, however, there's a gestational limit of 24 weeks. It seems like an outlier compared to the rest of Europe, and has much more in common with abortion law in the United States, or at least attitudes towards abortion law in the United States. What's abortion law in the United States? I think it's in flux. We don't really know at this point. States can regulate after viability, we know that, but viability is a shifting and nebulous marker, not least due to technology. Some US states have 20-week bans. It's not clear these are constitutional. It's interesting, though, to note that Texas's 20-week ban was not challenged by the same people which challenged its other provisions. The US Congress has failed to pass a 20-week ban on multiple occasions. One reason for the consternation and confusion is Planned Parenthood versus Casey's undue burden standard. Just, we don't know what that is. Or if we know what it is, somebody else thinks it's very different from what one person thinks it is. So we're still trying to figure out what that means. Some even believe that constitutionally mandated health exceptions means that, since every pregnancy affects a woman's health, abortion is legal through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason. But that's complicated by the fact that we actually have studies done which follow what happens after women are turned away for abortion based on gestational age limits. Spoiler alert, 95% don't regret after not having the abortion. So what do we do with all this? Let's, at least for the sake of argument, suppose we had European-style policies. What might happen to the number of abortions in the United States? Well, especially Western Europe already has a comparatively low rate, about 13 per 1,000. If the United States had this rate, we would go from something like about 1 million abortions per year to something like about 700,000 abortions per year. Why? Why does Western Europe especially have a much lower rate? I don't think we know, but it's likely due to in part to the social support. They have a lot of the things that I believe both Robin and I are calling for to support women and families. It's also true they have more restrictive laws. It's also true that there's much wider use of RU46, which doesn't get counted. So the bottom line is, at least in my view, social support isn't enough. It's essential, absolutely essential, and if, like me, you're a pretty traditional Catholic, it's absolutely essential for that reason too, based on the teaching of the church. But addressing root causes through social programs, we might lower the abortion rate substantially. In fact, I think we probably would lower the abortion rate substantially. But there's still a lot more questions to ask and a lot more things to think about. We have to face the difficult fact that abortion is not always about social issues or having wide access to contraception. In part, there are lots of reasons that have nothing to do with that. Consider quality control over childbearing. Somewhere between, we have terrible data on this, but I'll just use a very wide range. Somewhere between 65 to 90% of prenatal children diagnosed with Down syndrome are killed via abortion. This is despite the fact that people with Downs are happier than those who are normal, if they're surveyed about such things. Maybe you know that abortion is procured for some things that are fairly minor, like a cleft lip, or because a child is not the correct gender. Also, I think we need to have more honest discussions about how parents and male partners often coerce women and girls into having abortions, not least because abortion strongly correlates with intimate partner violence, especially when there are repeat abortions. And abortion is the fail-safe for other kinds of birth control. That helps explain, I think, why, except maybe for IUDs, states with more access to birth control in general do not have lower abortion rates than those that do not. Implicit in our sexual culture is a radical disconnect between sex and procreation, especially in the sexual culture of privileged white males, who are not surprisingly the most supportive of abortion rights of any demographic group. Wide access to abortion, whatever social support we offer, will continue to be considered necessary for those who wish to see the radical disconnect between sex and procreation maintained, regardless, again, of the social support that's offered. So I argue we need to #choose both. We need legal support and protection for both mothers and their prenatal children. And we must absolutely reject the binary political imagination which forces us to choose between these two vulnerable populations. We must absolutely reject it. And the thing is, the American people support, in general, this approach. According to Gallup, a whopping 71% of Americans want abortion largely illegal after week 12. That's despite the fact that before week 12, 63% of Americans want abortion largely legal. I often ask my students, is this a pro-choice or a pro-life country, after asking them that? The correct answer is both, right? It's both. I actually wonder if we should just get rid of that life choice binary. I don't think it's helpful. And also, importantly for our discussion today, when asked whether the law can protect both a mother and her unborn child, a 2016 Marist poll found that 77% of Americans said yes. 77%, including 79% of women, and even 71% of people who identify as pro-choice. Think about that for a second. 71% of people who ID as pro-choice respond yes to the question about whether the law can protect a mother and her prenatal child. So yes, I believe there's lots of common ground to be had, but it involves making a very explicit and sometimes difficult attempt to resist our embedded culture war, us versus them, life versus choice, right versus left culture, and choosing to love and protect them both.
I totally should have asked to go first. I don't need this, but it makes me feel comfortable. I'm just going to put this down. All right. First of all, I just want to thank University of St. Thomas for inviting me. Also, it's really exciting to get a chance to kind of debate and spar with Charlie in person, because we've been doing it online for a couple of years now, and so this is really a lot of fun. Charlie and I agree on a lot of things, which is why debating him is both interesting and kind of awkward, because we have a lot of things that we really have in common. And Charlie made me sound a lot less divisive than I really am, so I'm just going to harp in on all the things that we don't have in common. When I get asked to do these types of debates, usually there is a pro-life person, and then I'm kind of positioned as the pro-abortion person. And I'm going to say straight out, I am a pro-abortion person. I am pro every person who wants to end a pregnancy being able to do so without delays, without pressure, without coercion, and without financial burden. But Charlie and I have a lot of common ground, and I also believe that every person who wants to remain pregnant, who wants to give birth, who wants to give away that child, or who wants to parent should be able to do that without worrying that they do not have the support they need to do it. No one should ever feel like she has to abort because she has no system for staying pregnant, whether she wants to parent or relinquish the child. And this isn't just a moral stand. This is something that really matters a lot for the abortion rights movement in general. When people abort pregnancies, when they actually wanted to give birth and keep or give away that child, then that is how we get the idea that abortion harms women. That's where we come up with new abortion opponents. That's where we get more people who testify in favor of abortion restrictions, and that's where we get this impression that the general public is anti-abortion. So why can't we just make more social changes to support pregnant people and restrict abortion to the first trimester like they do in many countries in Europe? Charlie went through a lot of the restrictions that happen in Europe, but one of the things that he didn't discuss was how in many ways abortion is more accessible and less restrictive in Europe than it is here in the United States. A number of European countries, and I know that Charlie handed out, and I'm going to just rebuttal Charlie as we go at the same time so I don't have to do it later, give you guys more time to talk. A lot of European countries do not have mandatory waiting periods that require 2 separate visits to a doctor. And this is important because in the US, when you have to make 2 visits to a doctor, that's 2 days off of work, that's 2 days of childcare, that's 2 days of travel, that may be hotels, because we do not have as many clinics and as many places to get abortion as there is in Europe. In comparison, in Europe, you can go to a less restrictive country in just a short train ride, whereas in the US, 90% of all counties have no provider, and many states ask for you to wait 24, 48, or even 72 hours. This drives up the cost of getting an abortion. A majority of European countries allow medication abortion to be obtained at any private physician's office. Norway also allows abortion at request in any hospital that has a gynecology department. If you need a non-medication abortion, yes, you will have to wait, but otherwise, you just go in, you obtain your pills, and you go home. In the US, you can only get medication abortion at an abortion clinic. This often requires many trips in. You will have to do follow-ups, and you will have to come back. Some patients have to travel hundreds of miles in order to get to a clinic that performs this service. And most importantly, in European countries, abortion is covered by virtually all medical plans. The costs are almost always reimbursed, and it removes the burden of finding funding to pay for the procedure that US women encounter. It's These financial burdens that often lead to patients seeking second trimester abortions rather than early ones. There was a 2006 study by Guttmacher that said that 58% of patients who were getting second trimester abortions did so because they did not have the financial ability to get it earlier. Early abortions cost between $400 and $700 for the procedure alone. That doesn't include hotels, that doesn't include gas, that does not include any sort of childcare, that doesn't include missing wages. Once a pregnant person is 14 weeks gestation, that'll go up $100 to $200 a week, and sometimes even more as you get further along. 10% of all of the abortions in the United States are after the first trimester, 90% are during the first trimester. One of the problems that we have with getting more social programs is the fact that too many people who are pro-lifers believe that social assistance for pregnant people doesn't decrease the abortion rate. And I'm going to quote Michael New of the Charlotte Lozier Institute, who wrote in the National Review in 2014, "Overall, pro-lifers are of two minds about welfare benefits. It is correct that reducing financial pressures on pregnant women might persuade more of them to carry their pregnancy to term. However, high welfare benefits might either encourage or enable more single-parent families, and a large number of single-parent families would further reduce the stigma towards premarital or extramarital sex. This might create a more permissive sexual culture and one where abortions would happen more often. More importantly, there is not one peer-reviewed study which shows that greater spending on welfare or other social programs reduces the abortion rate. Some analysts point to lower abortion rates in European countries, which tend to have more generous public benefits for low-income earners. However, the abortion rate in many of these countries is rising, while the abortion rate in the United States has been falling. Pro-lifers should certainly advertise the excellent work of pregnancy resource centers that are doing in meeting the needs of many women facing unplanned pregnancy. But that said, expanding welfare benefits is a strategy that probably will be less successful than advertised." So is New right? It's hard to say. But that is the kind of mindset that we're going to have to battle in the legislature if we want to actually get any of these programs to happen. Now I'm going to look specifically at Minnesota. Minnesota is a wonderful example of all the things that we can do in order to help pregnant people who want to carry to term. We have generous social services, we have top-tier health care, we have the positive alternative grants that are at $1 million per year for pregnancy resource centers in the state. We've been passing equal pay bills, we've been passing family leave, we pulled our welfare cap in 2015, and that was a program that was pulled by Planned Parenthood and Minnesota Citizens Concerned for Life working together to remove it. Despite all of this, in 2014, the most recent year that we have numbers, 9,100 Minnesota women had abortions in this state. Social support does not address those who simply do not want to be pregnant. There are many physical costs to pregnancy, such as preeclampsia, hypertension, gestational diabetes, pregnancy-induced congestive heart failure, and I'll skip some because we have a time limit. This also does not address those who can't be pregnant because it takes away from their ability to care for other children. It doesn't address those who can't be pregnant because it will physically interfere with their jobs or with their studies, or who would miss work for illness, exhaustion, hospitalization because of dehydration, preterm labor, fainting, or finally, it does not address those who do not want to be pregnant and do not want to have a child for any reason, which is something that we should respect. In conclusion, as a society, we should increase support for women and families, such as affordable access to health care for all, paid family leave for all partners, protections from pregnancy discrimination, rental housing at colleges, in-school daycare centers at high schools, more housing, and even a child care voucher or a monthly child care allowance, such as conservative Elizabeth Stoker Bruning described in the American Conservative in 2014. But we should do all these things because they are good and just things to do to support families. It shouldn't be an action only hinged on restricting abortion in exchange. Just like in Europe, even with ample social supports, there's still a population in each country that once they learn they are pregnant, choose to terminate that pregnancy rather than bring it to term. For anyone who chooses that, there will always need to be safe, accessible path to make that happen. Europe's low gestational limits exist because its abortion laws, just like its other laws, are far more progressive than they are here in the United States. Because anyone who chooses abortion can access it easily, and fewer people need it due to ample age-appropriate sex education and contraceptive options. They simply do not need the later gestational options that pregnant people are forced to use in the U.S. because they couldn't get the care when they wanted it. Thank you.
Maybe 1 minute?
You want to rebuttal me?
Me.
Rebuttal me.
Can I rebuttal 1 minute?
You can totally rebut me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but both of us sort of semi-agreed that we wanted to hear more from you than us again.
I
But-
actually kind of want to hear what you think.
Okay. Victory.
So please be passing in your questions, because it looks like there's not going to be a long rebuttal time.
So I think New's argument is interesting and especially important because it is the kind of thing that I agree we're going to have to respond to. But and there's many things to say about it, but in the interest of time, let me just say one thing. It is true that abortion rates have been falling in the United States, but that is also correlated with lots more social support, right? So let me just I mean, it's hard to remember some of these, right? But the Family and Medical Leave Act from '93, the Childhood Hunger Relief Act 1993, Mental Health Parity Act 1996, the Newborns and Mothers Health Protection Act 97, SHIP, the State Child Health Insurance Program 97, the Affordable Care Act, which I think is a radical abortion reducer, Unemployment Compensation Act 2010, and Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act 2010. So yeah, things have been going down here, but it's also been correlated with more social support. Again, I agree with New that there isn't definitive proof of this, but you can use your common sense and also just look at correlation there. One quick thing, and then let's turn it over to question and answer. Why bring up Europe at all? I don't think it's because necessarily every country sort of fits the model for what I'm and others who take what I'm up to seriously. It's because we often hear, well, if you were to lower the abortion limit to say 20 weeks, much less 12 weeks, which some countries have in Western Europe, all these bad things are going to happen if you do it, right? All these bad things are going to happen. And I think, at least from the way I read it, many of these countries show that's just not true. Especially, and it's not necessarily related to the fact that abortion is paid for by the government, but it's also, if you look at countries like Ireland and Poland, they don't have those things. And they seem to be doing just fine, right? I mean, there are problems like any other country, but the disaster stories we hear about if you were to limit abortion this way seem to be overdrawn in my view when I look at countries like that. So yes, it's true that in these other countries abortion is more provided for and all the things that Robin said are correct. But at least my reason for pointing to Europe is just to say if we were to do both of these things, choose both, the scary stories that people tell aren't necessarily going to come true. And that's my rebuttal.
May I have a minute of rebuttal now that I got to rebut your rebuttal? Actually, I just had two things that I wanted to say quickly. And the reason I've said that Charlie and I actually have a lot in common. Europe is a good model to me because I'm a bad pro-abort. If you wanted to limit abortion to 12 weeks, I would probably be okay with it if you were going to make abortion entirely accessible and entirely covered in all healthcare plans, because I don't think we would have the needs for later abortion in the same way. When we look at, Charlie had something about abortion for fetal anomalies, abortion for sex selection. First of all, I don't necessarily agree with his assumptions about those, but even if I did, those are things that would not be a factor if we had earlier abortion limits. So that kind of takes away that whole argument. I like if we were going to have a Norway-style version of abortion, power, I'm right there. That's fine with me. And there was one thing that I just wanted to say because I wrote it down and then I totally forgot about it because it didn't actually fit into my thing. Charlie mentioned the Turnaway study and about how when they went back a couple years later and asked people, most of them did not regret not having an abortion. What he did not mention, though, is that in the Answer study, 60% of the people who they talked to actually fell further into poverty because most of them did not access abortion when they wanted to in the first place because they didn't have the money to do it. They've had more struggles with health. They've had more struggles with mental health. So yes, you don't regret your abortion, but they are
Not getting the
struggling.
abortion.
Oh, yeah. See, I just instantly go into that. I've been
Yeah.
spending too much time with pro-lifers. All right, there we go. That's all. Oop. Monk.
Do you want to stay up here if we're going to get questions?
Oh,
Okay, great. So, first question here is to Charlie. And it says, I agree with the pro-abortion speaker that even though the abortion laws in European countries may look stricter, it's much easier to have an abortion in Europe. If you would get stricter abortion laws in the U.S., how would you want to treat the women who perform their abortion illegally or seek an illegal abortion or get an illegal abortion? What would be the result of such illegal abortion?
I guess I'll answer without the microphone.
That one doesn't work.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, you are.
You can hear me without this?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
I thought you were using it as a crutch, too. 'Cause
Oh,
I
I don't
kind of
know.
like it.
Oh, okay. Because they had us turn it on before the thing started. I'm like, oh, it must just be for the recording, so it doesn't work, but okay. I spend a whole chapter in my book trying to show that the expectations that are thrust upon women, which often lead to abortion, most often perhaps lead to abortion, are patriarchal. And so there's almost all abortions are coerced abortions, it seems to me, from the perspective of women. So I don't think women should be punished at all for having an illegal abortion. I do think that same kind of logic does not apply to physicians that provide abortions. So I call for substantial penalties in a regime where this would be the case, substantial penalties for physicians that would violate the law. And, you know, I don't know what you think about that, but there's a physician that provided abortions in jail right now. His name is Kermit Gosnell. So the idea that somehow this is beyond the pale or can't put physicians in jail is just false, especially if we take seriously that these are vulnerable populations. So.
So there are some questions about coercion. Could I maybe ask those, because that'd be a follow-up
Sure.
to what Charlie says. There are questions for you. So given that according to Guttmacher, 75% of women seeking abortion are near or below the national poverty level, how is it plausible to describe their choice to terminate their pregnancy as truly a free choice as opposed to a kind of tragic dilemma? That's one of them. And let me just read the second one here to put another aspect of it. This is from a counselor for a crisis pregnancy center who I've met many women who have felt pressured by their spouse, social worker, nurses, patients to abort. What do you think of laws that make it so available that choosing abortion wins in such a case, as an example that she gave because there was no support? Isn't coercion pervasive, I guess is the
Yeah, I
kind of-
think that my response to that would be that coercive abortion, I mean, I'm sure that it does exist, but to say that all women are coerced into abortions because of, as Charlie puts it, a patriarchal system, or because there was pressure on them from their partners, or for all of these myriad of reasons, is saying essentially that women are somehow weaker than men and can be led astray, pushed by finances, pushed by their partners. I mean, I understand that Charlie is a feminist, and so I don't think that that's what he's trying to say, but to me it comes across as this idea that women are not as strong because women cannot hold up to these pressures from people who are saying that they need an abortion. One thing that I am going to say, there are places that offer abortion that probably are not the best of clinics. I think we can all agree with that, and that's a thing that everybody on either side will say. But a good clinic is always going to make sure that the person who is obtaining an abortion has done this without being coerced, has done this, they will cancel them, they will go through them, make sure that they know their other options. That is what a good clinic does. The reason we have bad clinics is because we have not enough abortion clinics So people have to seek whatever clinic they can find that's near to them. And a lot of times, especially when you're in the red states where I travel to a lot, because there are so few clinics, that's how you get into places where people feel pressured and won't get as much counseling as they need. Did that answer? I hope I just answered that. After last night, watching Trump I'm sorry. Watching politicians dance around questions, I'm really worried about not actually answering questions and saying.
Neither one of you stand right behind the other and look over the other's shoulder. Okay. So, this is to Charlie. Many, if not most, Americans who strongly support abortion restrictions, this I think a point that Robin raised, are also skeptical of expanding government welfare programs. Your examples from Europe seem to indicate correlation but not causation between increased social programs and lower abortion rates. And here's kind of the gist of the question. How would you try to persuade pro-life conservatives to compromise their limited government principles for the sake of saving unborn human lives?
Well, 3 ways. One would be on the merits of the relationship between the two, which is still unfolding. People are still doing studies. A second one would be, the other 2 would be political calculations. So in part of my work for Democrats for Life, I was talking with some legislators' aides about the choose both strategy, and I said, you know what? Even if you don't agree with paid family leave, we're not going to be the only country in the world that doesn't have some sort of family leave for much longer. It's going to happen. So whether you're supportive of it or not, it's going to happen. You can either try to do this now and help advance protection of prenatal children, or it could come later and you'll get nothing and be unhappy that we have, for some reason, more support for women in this way. So that would be one of 2 ways I'd talk about it being politically important to do. The second way, and the third thing I'd want to say is, I'm not a lawyer, but I've talked to a lot of them in advance of writing my book, and it's a somewhat novel understanding, but I think we don't understand, nobody really understands what the undue burden standard is yet. It's trying to be figured out as we go. I would want to argue, and I think Kennedy has sort of hinted at this in some of his things, the more support we have for women culturally, the less burdensome laws which restrict abortion are on women. At least that's the kind of case I would want to make to someone like Kennedy. So in point of fact, the list that I just laid off was read out of my book, which I used to try to show that we already have a different burden on women than we did back in '92 when Planned Parenthood versus Casey came out because of the increased social support. And that's not, that includes the Affordable Care Act and all these other things. So if we were to do all these dramatic things, I argue that it would make the burden on women, this is my phone. Oh, no.
Overtime?
No, somebody else's phone. Let's not minimize the burden. Let's acknowledge a very significant burden. But let's also acknowledge that the more social programs we have to relieve that burden, the less burdensome these legislative limits would become.
I'm with him.
Okay.
Hey, we found common ground.
So this question is to Robin. As a mother of a child with a disability, I think the questioner is asking, how do you justify selective abortion because of a genetic difference or an unwanted gender, race, etc.? My son could have easily been aborted, was recommended for abortion. He's now 22 years old and is a strong advocate for disability organizations, is a junior in college, and is a very handsome young man in a committed relationship.
First of all, I want to say, as a mother of 3, I'm very, very glad that your son is doing so well, because watching kids grow up it breaks my pro-abort heart. Anyway, I'm really glad things are going very well, and you have the support that was able to make this easy, and I think that, or not easy, nobody raises a child thinks that it's easy by any means. But it's not the choice that you can make for everyone. And I think that I am adamantly against doctors pressuring people into saying that they should have an abortion because of an anomaly. That is a choice, like everything else, that the family should make for themselves. It goes the same way. Asking somebody to have a child with a disability they don't feel that they are physically, mentally, spiritually, financially able to do, that to me is just as big of a travesty. So I understand that for you that this has been a blessing and a great, wonderful thing for you, and I'm glad, and I hope that every parent who chooses to bring a child to term and have a child with a disability feels just the same way. But to me, that doesn't justify telling people who don't feel that they can do it that they have to.
Okay, this is a question for Charlie. Pope St. John Paul II wrote that a society that does not protect life from conception to natural death has no foundation for Catholic action to promote social justice in all other areas of human life. That means that for Catholics, a pro-life stance which opposes abortion is a non-negotiable foundational moral teaching. To compromise on the abortion issue goes against the teaching of the magisterium. How do you respond to comments like that?
I agree with everything that the questioner said. So I'm not exactly sure what's implied in the question. But
Well,
I can guess.
if abortion is only legal after 12 weeks, or if even at some later time as part of the compromise, how do you start talking about compromise on what is, from the Catholic perspective, such a foundational issue?
Well, there's a huge distinction in the tradition between what we should be doing in our personal lives and in our churches, and making a prudential judgment about what we should do for a policy in a pluralistic culture. Benedict XVI, when he was head of the CDF, made this very clear. He said, hey, guess what? You can vote for a pro-choice candidate. You just can't vote for them because they're pro-choice. And you need a proportionately serious reason to do that. That's the head of the CDF saying that. So the Catholic teaching, I agree with everything Pope St. John Paul II said. I agree with what Benedict XVI said. And we can have reasonable disagreements about what is appropriate for, in our pluralistic culture, in our current moment, reading the signs of the times, how to instantiate that non-negotiable protection of the most vulnerable, how that looks in a culture like ours.
Question for Robin. In Europe, is there any protection for the consciences of doctors, pharmacists, et cetera, who don't want to supply the pills for a medical abortion? Your comment about every hospital with a gynecology department having to provide these pills concerned me on behalf of Catholic hospitals and other hospitals, some other hospitals as well.
That's actually a great question, and I am only moderately knowledgeable on Europe. I will tell you that there have been more countries now in Europe that are starting to push for conscientious clauses to make sure that such a thing happens. There was just a big case in, I want to say, Sweden, where there were nurses who were objecting to just such a thing. The way I feel about conscience clauses is the way I've always felt about conscience clauses, and that reflects not just what's going on in Europe, but what goes on here, which is that I am firmly in favor of people objecting to and refusing to do certain things because it goes against their beliefs. What they have to do is make sure that it does not do it in a way that inhibits that person from being able to access what is her right. So if a person wants to get her birth control pill and a pharmacist says, I will not fill this prescription, that is just fine for the pharmacist to do as long as that pharmacist does not make sure that nobody else will fill it. If nobody else will fill it, then you're putting your moral, conscientious objections over somebody else's, and that is where the line is drawn for me.
Can I ask a quick question about
Of course.
that? So suppose there's one OBGYN in I'm doing a thought experiment here. I don't have any place in mind.
No, I know, and there's actually, this has come up a lot because when you get into really rural areas, you will find out that there is only one CVS that you can go to in which you can go get your birth control filled, and that's where
That's what I'm trying to capture with the analogy. So, so imagine there's only one OBGYN within several hundred miles, and the person is without resources, and the OBGYN happens to be very strongly pro-life. Would you say that she should be forced to do the abortion if no one else will in the area?
I think the first question would be what is the abortion for? What is this is a question of we shouldn't be in this situation in the first place because why do we only have one OB
Right.
in forever? But I apparently just time limited myself. I apologize. So like, are we saying that the abortion is because, say, a person is in physical danger? Because this is something that has happened recently in a Catholic hospital in the U.S. where a woman had, it was kind of like the one in Ireland, was having septic issues, and the Catholic hospital said, you know, we don't think that you are quite to the health point yet where we can consider this a morally allowable abortion. This has happened down in Arizona, like in 2010 with the McBride nun who approved an abortion for somebody who was having congestive heart failure. So, I mean, we shouldn't be in this situation, I guess, is where, and I know this is a really, really avoiding the answer sort of thing, but it infuriates me that we are at a place where we have healthcare that is so compartmentalized, especially in metro areas and not metro areas. I mean, this is the same thing with birthing right now. We have birthing hospitals in the metro area, but we no longer have areas in outside of the metro where people can go to their local hospitals to give birth. You have to try and do. We need more care. I'm sorry. He keeps flashing cards at me, and it distracts me. We need more. We need more health care.
I think I can agree with that.
Okay.
Okay, there's slightly more questions for Robin than for Charlie, so I'm going to do one more for you.
I'm sorry. Man. You can answer mine if
You
you
say
want.
that the fact that someone doesn't want to be pregnant is reason enough for an abortion. According to Guttmacher, 7 states in the District of Columbia have no gestational limits whatsoever. Given your position, would you have any objection to aborting a healthy fetus at, say, 8 months or after?
Yes. Did I mention I'm a really bad pro-abort? I do have issues. When it comes down to abortion in general, I'm more like, I would be firmly happy if Roe were actually upheld in the way that it's supposed to be upheld, which is that you have access to safe legal abortion in the first trimester, you have access to abortion with reasonable limitations in the second trimester, and that unless the person's life is in jeopardy, there is no abortion in the third trimester. It's not turning out that way, though. So, and that's, I mean, if we could all come to a consensus on it, I think that would be a great way to really move forward as a country, but we've been arguing it since it was ruled. So after 43 years of this, I just don't think the argument's going to stop anytime soon, unfortunately.
Charlie, what role do you believe comprehensive sex education should or could play in reducing unwanted pregnancies? Okay, there's a second question. It's a compound question, so like a presidential debater, you're going to have to deal with a compound question. How are you measuring access to birth control, and what is your reaction to IUDs as an exception? Okay, so several questions in there. Sex education and measuring access to birth control.
Well, sometimes comprehensive sex education is a loaded term. If by that the questioner means really comprehensive sex education, then absolutely. Yeah, more knowledge, the better. But often what that means is sort of like contraception good, abstinence ridiculous. And I don't think that's what the data actually bears out. So if by comprehensive, it's really comprehensive and takes all the data seriously, then I think that would be great. I think that would be, I mean, I'd like a pony too, but I think that would be great. The second question was about what again?
How are you
feel about
measuring
IUDs?
access to birth control and
There's something
you
about
IUDs as an exception?
Well, I
Think?
think
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on this. I've just started to read up on it. Maybe you know more about this than I do. But it looks like there's at least some evidence to suggest that states that have broad access to family planning and loose abortion restrictions don't have lower abortion rates than states which have substantial abortion restrictions but not much family planning support. And so again, it's correlation causation, but that leads me to conclude that the more contraception equals less abortion argument is at least questionable. with the exception perhaps of IUDs. I think there's been some studies recently done in Colorado and in St. Louis showing that IUDs might be different. I've also read some things that call those studies into question. I'm not in that business, so I don't know whether it should be called into question. But I do know that lots of people think that especially non-copper IUDs are abortifacients, which would be a problem for lots of folks. And of course, IUDs really don't do anything to stem our out-of-control STI infection rate. It's now 25% in New York City. And everybody knows where to get contraception in New York City. So, so I don't know, there's a lot in those 2 or 3 questions. I don't know if I answered it the way I should have or I answered it appropriately, but that's my answer.
I think that Charlie and I could play a little bit of battling statistics, because we can always play a little bit of battling statistics. That's one of the fun of this topic. I would object to the idea that expanding sex ed and expanding birth control does not bring down the abortion rate. One of the reasons why it seems like there is less abortion in states that have more abstinence-only education and have less access to birth control is because there are less clinics there. There are much more restrictive laws. It's really hard. People leave. People leave and go get abortions in other states because it's way easier. Let me rephrase that. People with resources leave, and that's why abortion access will always be a civil rights issue, because people with resources will always have the opportunity to get an abortion. When it comes to IUDs, when it comes to birth control, especially for teens, one of the reasons that our abortion rate has been going down so much is because we no longer have as extensive of a teen pregnancy rate. It has been dropping steadily over the last 5 years, I think, maybe longer. So access to, especially IUDs, long-term reversible contraception, is a good thing, because it's something that cannot be done wrong. It's not like if you accidentally break your condom. It's not like if you realize you didn't take all your pills at the exact same time every day. So I'm unsurprisingly pro-birth control as well.
This question does not have not address. I guess it's addressed to both of you. Why don't women take advantage of laws that promote placing children with other families through adoption, or even baby Moses laws allowing a child to be left at a hospital, etc.? So I guess maybe Robin first, but I think it's also to Charlie.
One of the things that, based on statistics, we have seen ever since before Roe, after Roe, during Roe, the last decades, is that there is very little change ever on the adoption rate. Regardless of how hard it is to get an abortion, how easy it is to get an abortion, how legal it is, how illegal, it does not change how many people put up babies for adoption. That remains pretty much steady. So what you're doing when you're making abortion illegal is you are not making people decide that they are going to have babies and give them up to other families. It's making them decide that they're going to either find a way to illegally access abortion, or they're going to have the child and raise it themselves. That does not change. I do like baby Moses laws. I've paid a lot of attention, especially, I want to say it's Indiana, where they've been doing the child drop box. The problem is that, I know that sounds awful. It's a child drop box, but yeah, it's boxes that are being set up so that basically there's an alarm that goes off when an infant is placed because of the weight, and then people know to respond to it automatically, so that people can give over a child if they have a child and there's no issues. And I explained that now totally. Oh, so these happen at police stations, these happen at hospitals, but these happen in places where the people who are the most likely to give over a child, usually a teen and often people of color, these are places where these people already feel in danger. They're worried that they are going to get into trouble, that the police are going to see them and arrest them. We had a woman in Alabama I want to say 2 years ago, who came in and left her baby at a hospital after she gave birth. And because they found meth, I believe, in the baby's system, they started going through the tapes trying to figure out who the mother is. Like, how can you just give over a child if you're always worried that even when you do it the right way, they're going to come back and try to arrest you for endangering this child? So I would love to see these systems set up better, but at this point they're not working, and I don't know how to fix that. If I did, then I would probably be somewhere else right now doing it.
I think we probably need to stop there
Oh.
because the class is coming in here at 1:30, so let's thank the panel.
Sorry.
Before,
I just talked totally over
Fine,
them.
so fine.
before I let you go, let me just plug both of their books. There's Charlie's book, Beyond the Abortion Wars. He will actually have some copies here if anyone wants to get a copy. You'll have to buy it, I think. And Robin's book, Crow After Row, which is easily available on Amazon, Kindle, etc. Like the Murphy Institute on Facebook, follow them on Twitter, go to stthomas.edu /Murphy Institute, right? For the next Hot Topics program. Thank you, that was great.
That was a lot of fun.
Great job. Really, really a good.